Hello and welcome to the Christchurch Fox Chapel podcast. It's the fastest growing conservative, evangelical, charismatic Anglican podcast in the entire Fox Chapel area. I'm joined today by an elder of the church, a holder of one of the great offices of the church, in fact. It's our junior warden, Kris Kann.
Hello everyone.
Hi Kris. And I've just been licked by a dog right down the ear. Oh.
That's Leo. Hi, Lee.
Oh, you see, we really just do one take, Kris, with this. And even though I've been licked down the ear hole by a dog, we're still, he's eating my notes. We're going to do this.
We're going to try.
So as promised last week, we said that we would like to have some testimonies. It's a new year. It's a new church year. It's Advent. And what better way to begin the new year than really the two things that you need, which is one, to be licked down the ear by a dog, and two, just to reflect on what God has been doing in the last year. And Kris, you have this awesome testimony.
I do.
You do?
Well, I wouldn't say, yes, it's awesome and what the Lord has done for us, for our family, and really the big answer for our entire church community. So, yes, it is.
You've been thinking a bit about the difference between faith and trust. And Leo the dog, and everybody wants a Leo.
Everybody wants a Leo.
I think he's been thinking about this a lot.
He has. He's being very distracting in the corner of the room.
Yep, he's eating an iPhone.
I think he's eating,
or
a
something.
light bulb or box.
A light bulb. Has God been saying something to you about faith and trust?
He has. So this whole thing started about 3 years ago, but with my daughter Rachel and her quest to get into medical school. And but really the Lord has been working on this on me for a very long time. And so we had this amazing answer to prayer. We refer to it fondly as the miracle of the women's group.
The miracle of the women's group.
Yes. And there have been many, many answers to prayer in that group. We should really write them all down. But this was, from my vantage point, I saw every little nuance, small answer, and ultimately the big answer along the way. And it really came down to my understanding finally of the difference between faith and trust. I had never really thought about it before.
Right.
And it was funny, after this answer happened, Rachel, and we'll get to it, but she finally, spoiler alert, she did get into medical school, which you will find out soon. But I was telling the story a few days after it had happened at an IF table dinner. And Connie Hughes was there. And after I'd gone through this whole telling, she looked at me and she said, Kris, if you had to boil it down in a word, what you learned through this whole process, what would it be? And I thought to myself, that was a tough question to answer. And over the next few days, that's where trust just kept coming back to me. Trust.
And the difference between trust and faith, I guess.
Right.
Being that it's applied in some way?
Well, that, faith is what you believe. You believe God is who he says he is. You believe what the word, says about God. Trust is more of a choice. It's an action. You act upon it. And it takes time and effort to develop. It's a mutual commitment that develops over time. It's someone's word matches their actions.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So what I found was I believed in God.
Mm-hmm.
I believed he is who he says he is. I believe he's sovereign. I believe he can do anything. I had a little difficulty trusting him all the time, I will say, honestly. And when I say that, I mean, when I would pray about something, I had a hard time letting it go because I had a hard time trusting that his answers would be what I wanted the answers to be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right.
So you believe that he's real.
Yes.
And that he might even answer prayers. He
Definitely.
just might not do what you want.
Yeah. He might not give me the answer that I wanted. And so that's the bottom line through this whole thing. It was really the opposite of trust. And this fear and distrust led to so much anxiety and restless working behind the scenes, behind my prayers over the years. And so I was living as though I had faith, which I do, and I believed in God and who he is and his faithfulness, but I was living very differently. I was living as if I wasn't really sure.
Right. It may even have been you at our vestry retreat that had that phrase, functional atheism. I don't know if it was that you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
Right.
that kind of thing, in a way, that the noises in the background, by the way, listener.
Sorry.
Our Leo, the dog, who's already eaten quite an expensive looking light bulb. And now he's moved on to some documents. So don't mind him. He's great. Everyone wants a Leo.
He's quite spoiled and typically the center of attention, and he isn't right now. So he's trying to get bad attention, really, is what he's trying to do. But
We love him.
ignore him. We do love him.
Yeah, functional atheism, I guess, would be that thing you were talking about, whereby you have this agreement that God's real and it's all there, and you do all the right things in a sense, but there's not actual real trust. Really, ultimately, you're kind of trusting yourself, I guess.
Right. And you're trying to control the outcome because you're not trusting what his outcome is for you, and that his outcome is ultimately the best. So yes, that's exactly right.
So to get specific, what was the situation and what was the outcome that you needed or wanted God to do for you?
In this, with Rachel.
Yeah.
So the outcome was, she had wanted to become a doctor since she was 10. Lifelong dream, and did, very well in college, did very well on her exams for med school. And, we were sort of there's so many layers to this. It's like an onion that you just keep peeling and peeling. And because we were so self-assured and self-reliant about this whole process, and her doing so well that there wasn't a question in her mind that she wasn't going to get in. I don't even, to be honest, I'm not even sure what I prayed the first time she applied the first cycle. I'm not even sure there really was a prayer, because we just sort of thought, oh yeah,
We've got this.
Yeah. We've got this because we did everything that, should be just easy entrance. And we were so sure that she was going to get in that we were completely shocked and humbled, which is another layer to all of this. When she didn't get in.
Were you really humbled though? I mean, because that's the right thing to say.
No, so things were chipping away at in my mind that we thought we had everything. Did we really invite him in and rely on him in any way through that first cycle?
Yes. So the Kris Kann monument got a kind of chip to the alabaster leg, but it's still standing.
It did.
Oh, that's funny.
Yes. So that was the first cycle.
Right.
And then the second cycle happened, and she had a few interviews, but ultimately did not get in anywhere.
When you say second cycle, is that the same time of year, another round of colleges, or is this? No,
this is a whole. So the first cycle begins in June, and it runs until the following May.
Oh, okay. Right.
So it's a whole year. Mm-hmm. And then the second year. Okay. So the second cycle, again, had some interviews, but ultimately didn't get in. And so, what I'm skipping is all of the hard work of the application process, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And she was working full time. But plus all of the pain and disappointment and rejection and just overall suffering that she went through, that our whole family went through, you know, during this time frame. So, you know, and also what I've skipped over is all of the suggesting that I did, which I say in air quotes, which really amounted to a lot of nagging on my part.
Of her.
Because I was trying to, you know, work behind the scenes to try to make this happen.
So if you do this and you do this, then you'll increase your chances, and you need to do this.
Right.
Why haven't you done that?
Right. So even though I was praying, I had the women's group praying, I was still working nonstop, worrying nonstop, hand-wringing nonstop, and suggesting things to her nonstop, which really only created more anxiety, you know, with her, which she already had enough of, to try to make, you know, quote, my outcome come about. And so by the time the third cycle came around, so here we are in the, you know, beginning the third year.
Yeah.
I really realized that I had to really give it over to God at this point, and stop all the behind the scenes. That if I really entrusted something to Him, I had to take my hands off of it. And there's a saying that I love that is, faith, basically I'm paraphrasing, faith drops the letter, true faith drops the letter in the mailbox and lets it go, while distrust holds on to a corner of it and wonders why the answer never comes. And that's what I was doing. I was trying to control everything, and I wasn't letting go completely. And so by this third cycle, I stopped working. I stopped nagging. I stopped suggesting. I stopped everything but praying, keeping the women's group praying, and I really finally was able to let it go with His help. Now, there were still situations where I literally had to pray in the moment, you know, don't let me suggest that, don't let me nag that, because she knew what she needed to do. Me suggesting things was just, again, my way of trying to control the situation.
So a huge amount of work in you in this process.
Yes.
And a sort of staged letting go, you know, from full control to kind of holding onto a corner to letting go.
Exactly.
That's a lot of change in just a couple of years.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is. And it was, you know, the Holy Spirit. It was through quiet time, through prayer. It was, and this whole year's process, there was this letting go, this developing trust and developing a track record with Him. But there was also, you know, little tweakings of my prayer time where I would pray for something. And I would pray for Rachel to, you know, obviously have medical school happen. And then I would pray for her to come to a real lasting relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
And even in those moments, I kept hearing this small voice saying, you know, why do you pray in that order? Why is it med school first and then me? And it was even down to those levels where in these small ways, He was still showing me that, you know, He should be first.
But He was talking to you and you were hearing His voice.
Well, yes. I mean, yes, you can, you know, it was nudging. It was,
wow.
You know, I would get done with a prayer and I would hear, why is it in that order? And
yeah. And people listening to this might say, well, I don't hear God. On occasion I have heard God speak very audibly. And on other occasions it's just been a very strong, convincing sense and sometimes it's somewhere in between.
Right.
And for you, are you talking about a kind of big hand coming out of space and saying, hey, and writing it on the wall? Or is it just a feeling? Or
No, but it's a very strong sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's repeated.
Oh, okay.
And then you start to see it in other areas and other readings and other books from our women's group. It starts to sort of bombard you, and you just know. And that was one of the things that happened, is that my priorities were out of order, and through all this thing, through this unwanted situation with Rachel, that was one of the things also that came out, along with me letting go.
And can you help us understand a little bit about that process then, hearing and letting go? Because it doesn't sound as though this is a quick and simple story, as though you woke up, oh no, I'm in the wrong, click, okay, I'm in the right now. There seems to be a process here where you're quite close to God, and maybe not even necessarily liking what you're hearing, but kind of knowing by degree that it's right, that God's right. Right.
Yes. It is a process, as you said, and I think it just requires a lot of quiet time. It requires like every morning I start with my cup of coffee and my Bible in the dining room, and I look forward to that time. That is the best time of my day.
Yeah.
And that's when a lot of the things happen.
No, that's interesting. So there's a regular kind of thing, and that's where God shows up.
Right. And that's, and whether it's out of a scripture that I had read before many times, and that day it's new, and it has a new application to that time in my life right now, or I see it in a different way. That's just gradually how it started to happen, and then I would catch myself. So it wasn't like it was overnight that I all of a sudden just could let everything go, or that I felt like my priorities were in the right order. But my eyes were open to it, and then I would catch myself, and then it's just the more you do something, the more you catch yourself, the more you alter what you were doing. It's a change.
So really it builds up, and it sounds as though there's a series of little things almost that God's doing in your life before we get on to really the big answers that God was doing for you. Just feels a little bit as though through being closer to him in this suffering and need, and letting go and trust, the trust has kind of been building more trust almost in your life.
Right. So ultimately he answered the big prayer of med school, but all along the way there were multiple answers of smaller situations that were in a way almost more important to me, because they were so personal.
It's the detail, isn't it?
It's the detail, and it's the fact that when it's that personal, he sees you, and he sees what is troubling you or concerning you, and it's that small, intimate way that he's involved. And he's there. That is so important. And one example of this was recommendation letters. So a big part of these applications for med school, and I'm sure graduate schools in general, but is recommendation letters. And it was a source of major anxiety for me the first 2 cycles. And this time I just decided, as I said, I was going to step back. And Rachel began to work with a physician who was just great. He was an excellent mentor, really advocated for her, and he would also be a very influential person to get a recommendation letter from, which was really why she was so excited to get the job in the first place. But then he ended up being just a fantastic person. as well. And so each time I saw when I was obedient and I submitted to God, that he encouraged me to stay along that path. So here Rachel's working for this doctor and, would be influential, but she was hesitant to ask him for a letter.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. Of course. And I think partly was he had done so much for her already. She felt like, I can't ask him. He's just been so great. I just can't possibly ask him for one more thing.
And asking people is hard.
It is hard. It is hard. But I also think somewhere deep down, it was a test for me in a way, because it was really the reason for this job in the first place. And, this was my weakness. This was my area where I just couldn't let go. And so I literally sometimes had to hold on to something and pray in the moment, Lord, please don't let me say it. Please don't let me nag her about it. Please don't let me say, this is crazy. You are not asking for this letter.
Right. And don't make me write it for her.
Exactly. Right. The email to ask.
Yeah.
And I didn't. Yes, I didn't. With his help, I didn't. And one day out of the blue, Rachel was sitting having lunch in the cafeteria with his doctor, and a friend of his walks over and sits down with them for about 20 minutes through their lunch. And Rachel had known this other doctor but never really worked with him, and he used to have a position in the medical school. And so after this 20-minute sit-down lunch, he just right there decides he's going to write Rachel an unsolicited letter of recommendation. That, like, it sounds like okay, but no, that doesn't happen.
No.
I mean, that just doesn't happen. And so also when you ask someone, it normally takes them, they've got a lot of other things to do, it takes them a while. And we were getting toward the end of...
So the deadline's approaching.
And
the pressure's on you because you've been holding onto furniture and things so as not to tell her to do this thing. This is great.
Ready to blow.
Yeah.
And he has his done and sent in within 2 days. And the doctor who she was working with at the time just said one day, a letter from him is so much more impactful than if I had written one for you. I mean, so that whole thing, like, I was so worried, so sure that those letters were going to make the difference in a yes or a no.
And in a sense, you were right. But
yes, but he was like, I got it. Don't worry about it. Like, just, what he had in mind for her was so much better than what I could see, which is literally always the case. But I also learned through that too is, look, that wasn't perfect. I literally had to pray and hold on with all, everything I had, that I wasn't going to blurt something out. And I was still very unsettled about it.
Yes.
I was like, okay, Lord, I said, I'm going to give this to you, and I give it to you. But I was still super anxious about it. And, I guess I kind of thought when people talked about that in the past, that they were completely serene on the inside and were able to just give something over, and they felt like they were in a field of wildflowers. And I wasn't feeling that way. But I've learned through this that that's okay, that even if you're still unsettled about something, you can give it over and still be obedient. And it's not going to be perfect, but that's not what he's after. He's after our pursuit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So that was eye-opening to me.
And it's fun listening to this because I've already read the account and we're building up for the miracle. But the
I thought you were going to say, because I already got all this.
Yeah, easy. But the real story is actually that journey of proximity to God and not the miracle.
It is.
But you need to tell us, what actually happened.
Yes. Okay, sorry. So we're rambling on.
We're not rambling. This is awesome. And the dog has stopped.
Yeah, the dog left us.
Yeah, he's no.
No.
I've not had a lick.
No, he got bored. So the miracle is we are now deep into the third cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are now into we're at February.
Right. You've let go of the corner of the envelope.
I have let it go.
I mean, you've probably damaged a lot of furniture
Exactly.
just through gripping it.
The nails are gone, but I have let go of the envelope.
And the letters are in.
They're in.
Okay.
The
cool.
letters are all in, and so she's had
church friends, because they're praying for you, right?
Yes.
In the midst of this as well.
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. So she's had 3 interviews,
mm-hmm.
and she is waitlisted at 2 places at this point. And this is now the beginning of last February, our last sort of known regular world occurrence before the virus.
Oh, BC.
Yes. Before Corona, exactly. Yeah. BC. So I am standing around at coffee hour after church one Sunday, and Kat walks up to me, and out of the blue, she said, "Hey, I've been thinking about Rachel."
Yeah.
Yes, I love her. And she said, I've been thinking our Wednesday group, which is a smaller Bible study, we should fast for her. And I was like, yeah, that would be fantastic.
So she volunteered this?
She totally volunteered. I wasn't even talking to her. I don't even know who I was talking to, but she literally walked up and out of the blue brought Rachel up.
Yeah.
And so I was, yes, that'd be fantastic. So she said, okay, let's talk about it this Wednesday, which was 4 days from that point. And she said, let's plan to do it the following Wednesday. And as I'm standing there and I said, okay, great, my mind immediately went to that date in February, which was the scheduled date of Rachel's last interview of her last cycle.
Oh, yeah.
Of the med school process.
Unbelievable, yeah.
And Kat had no way of knowing that.
No.
I didn't tell anyone that she had an interview yet. I was probably going to, I'm sure, enlist the women's group to start praying, but it was 2 weeks away. I hadn't even
this is a miracle. She can't even get to church on time. This is a miracle.
I know. Well, you could say, Kat, 2.5 years, what took you so long? So she was still late. No. But, and when I say Rachel's last interviewing cycle, she, at the end of 3 years, you have to take your MCATs over.
Oh, they kind of expire or something.
They do.
Okay.
For a lot of schools. And so she was already saying she wasn't going to do it again. That was because she had been in the school mindset at that time, and all that information was very fresh. And she was contemplating other options in the back of her mind at this point. So this was literally the last interview. And one of my prayers through this whole thing was also that it was done in such a way that, we could only say that this was by God.
Yeah, you would have no way of saying, we kind of did this.
Right.
Yeah.
And, for Kat to walk up to me out of the blue to fast on this last interview, we were at, my son used to play a game with my father when they were young called 4th and 99. It was a football game.
Oh, yeah.
And it was always 4th and 99 yards to go with 0.01 seconds left on the clock.
Yeah.
And my dad would be the quarterback, and my son would be the diving wide receiver that, caught the ball at the last, time had run out.
Yeah.
Right? So this was 4th and 99 to me. Time had literally was, running out. And
awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, we, that day comes, Kat emails us all a prayer to keep in mind for Rachel on that day, and 6 of us fast. And Rachel goes to this interview, has a great day, and really felt good about it. And this school was unlike any other, was that you had an interview on a Wednesday and they told you the decision by Friday. And nobody does that.
Right.
But this is the way they do it. And so we prayed on a Wednesday, and we prayed, a lot of things for her. But the one thing was to get a yes, to have a great day, have a great interview, and to get into admittance. And so Friday rolls around. She gets back from work, and you hear by email, She comes home, and there's also a letter in the mailbox from the one school that she hadn't heard from yet. And so she gets home, gets a letter, gets an email. She opens up the email, and it's a yes.
Amazing.
She opens up the letter, and it's another yes.
Another yes.
Yes. So 2.5 years of nothing but no's, rejections, discouragement, and in one day we asked for one yes, and in God's economy we got double. She got 2 yeses.
An abundance of a yes.
An abundance of a yes. Yeah.
And then all the little timings are just moon landing, right? I mean, it's just a window, really. That it's such a narrow window that it would all land at the same time. As Kat's thing with the fasting, and those lessons that you learned along the way.
Right.
And you're telling this story, and I'm thinking, wow, the medical school is almost like a footnote to the real story.
It is. No, it really it is. There were so many other small little answers along the way that his hand was in it. Like even at that interview that day, that Wednesday, one of the things, since Rachel had been out of school for a few years, she was starting to feel a little self-conscious about this process is taking so long. And let's face it, when you hear no often enough, you start to lose confidence.
Oh, it really hurts. Yeah,
it does. And so when she would go to these interview days, and there were people that were younger than her, this was becoming sort of a confidence issue, and so what are the chances that at this last interview, again, her interviewer brings up this topic of this exact issue, and he has the personal perspective of going right from undergrad into medical school.
Yeah, that's what he did.
Right. Whereas his wife came out and worked for a few years and then went into medical school, just like Rachel's situation.
Yeah.
And he said honestly to Rachel that he felt that she got so much more out of medical school than he ever did. Because he felt like it was just a continuation of college, just more schooling, where she felt like she was training for a career, for a vocation. How
fascinating. So he was all for what was going on with Rachel.
He was all for that, but had no idea that this was, rumbling around in her under the surface. He brought it up, and she still remembers that conversation, and it did so much to encourage her and to look back at this time in a positive way.
So are you a stronger Christian now then than you were a few years ago?
I am. Yeah. I can definitely say I am. I can definitely say I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but I can definitely use what I've learned, what the Lord has shown me through that time. And it's funny because a couple of things have happened recently that I've used that track record, and that's something that would have really upset me.
Right.
One with one of my kids and one with something else that I wouldn't have reacted the way I did now had this not happened.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So there's this ongoing fruit of this increase in proximity to God, and faith really being about trust. There's this ongoing reduction of anxiety, I guess.
Right. Rest. Peace. Yeah.
I've got to really finish by asking you if you have an illustration from an early 20th century tightrope walker or whatever.
That's oddly specific, but yes, I do.
Well, I give the gift of prophecy, and I just felt the Lord saying, ask about tightrope walkers from 1900.
Yes, named Blondin. So one of the things when I started to think about, well, what's faith and what's trust and how are they different and what do I have and what don't I have, and I was reading a few articles about this difference, and one illustration. I mean, you could look at Noah and say that he built an ark and there wasn't a drop of rain in the forecast. So, that's trust.
That is.
That's a confident expectation of something the Lord is telling you. But there was also this Great example of this tightrope walker who did, a lot of crazy stunts, but one of the most famous things that he had walked across was Niagara Falls. And he did it many, many, many times, and there was always, huge crowds waiting on either side. And
so he just walked back and forth across Niagara Falls.
He did.
On a tightrope.
On a tightrope. And he did not just that. Sometimes he did it blindfolded. Sometimes he did it backwards.
Didn't he fry an egg or
there
something?
There was how he did that, I have absolutely no idea, but there was a report that he cooked an egg out there. But he also pushed a wheelbarrow. I always want to say barrel. It's a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, wheelbarrow across. And one of these times...
On the tightrope.
On the tightrope.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so one of these times he pushed this wheelbarrow across and stepped off to this cheering crowd, and he asked them, "Do you think that I can make it back across?" And of course they're all cheering, "Yes, do it. We know." They're going crazy. Of course they think he can. They're all for him. They want him to do it. And then he said, "Okay, so which one of you is going to get into the wheelbarrow?"
Which one of the crowd is going to get in?
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, what do you expect? There was total silence.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So the difference between faith and trust is, they had faith that he could do it. They've seen him do it a million times. They didn't trust themselves with that knowledge, with that faith. They weren't ready to put, their life's trust in the fact that he could successfully get them across. And
his agent or manager or someone got in the barrow in the end, because I guess no one else would.
So yes, so his manager, Harry Colcord, was his name, and one of these times, the crowd, was waiting for him to cross on the tightrope, and then they are like horrified to see he's pushing his manager in this wheelbarrow.
Brilliant.
And he may be like a brilliant manager. He wants to, quadruple the ticket sales. I don't know. Or he really did.
Maybe he was hungry.
Trust. Exactly. He really did trust him.
Wanted an egg.
And Blondin. But reportedly, he said, Blondin, the tightrope walker, says to his manager who's in the wheelbarrow, "Look up, Harry. You are no longer Colcord. You are Blondin. Until I clear this place, be a part of me, mind, body, and soul. If I sway, sway with me. Do not attempt to do any balancing yourself." And I thought, that just summed this whole thing up.
Yeah.
Like, he's saying, look, remember that series we did on Up? Like, look up, look at me, abide in me, and don't attempt to do anything without me.
Yeah.
And it also circles back to, I think 2 Sundays ago, you said that trust and patience is not passive.
No.
So when they say don't do anything, that's not sitting around being lazy or whatever. It's
exhausting.
It is.
Trusting God.
It's
it's hard work.
It is.
Yeah.
So all these times, these examples of giving it over and trust, it's hard.
Yeah, letting go is a really active thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like what I said, Beth Moore says, sometimes it's work not to work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so true. So it isn't a passive thing. It's actually a very active thing. And as you said, it's a strengthening thing and preparing. And anyway, I loved that example.
Well, I'm just so grateful you shared this with us. It is fantastic. Really great. One of my real disappointments about our podcast is that it's not quite long enough to get to Trader Joe's at McCandless Crossing from Fox Chapel. And I think this is probably to Trader Joe's and then back past Bill Gordon's house and then somewhere around the Thomases where the Howsons used to live. It's going to conk out. But there's enough time left then for a couple of Nirvana songs before home. So this is really great. This is the perfect day. And I really appreciate that.
Oh, good. No.
Kris, it's just awesome that you would do this for us. I think there's nothing more encouraging than hearing a story, and the detail is so beautiful. And and what it's done for your faith is so great. And then I think to the church, I just think, well, to have a leader in the church who's been through this is just so good.
Well, in the church, one last quick thing, is just constantly ministering to me and the whole community. And what I've learned through this whole thing is just how important they are. And between, whoops, you signed me off of the
No, the Los Yetis.
It's like my Academy Award speech and the commercials.
No, this is really good. Ignore the Los Yetis. They'll be fine.
No, but between, all the prayers and the women's group and the fasting and, Joe Naraki spent hours with Rachel helping her with her interviewing skills.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a body coming together.
Right.
And each part had its own role and played a vital part in this coming together. So really it happened to my family and I am extremely grateful, but it's really an answer for all of us.
And that, you talked about God's economy, really is how God works. This faith begets faith, and it spreads and it goes viral, and then more. There's always more with the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Oh.
And it's the whole experience, like when Paul talks about knowing God's love, and how wide and how deep that whole he talks about knowing in terms of experiencing it, not just in theory. And that's also what, when I look back on this time, is that I experienced it. It wasn't just something I read about or I heard about. And it's has also forever deepened my faith and trust. And it's there for everyone. So
my desire really is that, having heard this, if anyone's got anxiety about this kind of thing, they'd be encouraged. And if anyone's got an answer already, that they would be encouraged to share that as well in one of the next weeks of Advent. It would be absolutely awesome. Kris, I'm really glad to work in a church with you. Since the days of you crouching in shrubberies. And that's a whole different story.
That is a whole different story.
But I do sense that this particular Colombian band has tracked me down to the secret studio where we are today. And I think I heard them outside earlier. And as they fade in, we're going to fade out. They are feeling crazy and they're lifting their arms. They're charismatics. They hear from God. You can see them at the window. You can hear them. Oh, thanks so much for joining us. This has been a podcast of Christ Church Fox Chapel, and we'll see you very soon. God bless.